She is a lifelong conservative, supporting constitutional principles. She has been an active Tea Party with Fayette County Issues Tea Party and is a local coordinator of the South Atlanta Tea Party. And she's also active in participating with Stop Common Core Georgia and national coalitions, the Georgia 10th Amendment Coalition, Georgians for Healthcare Freedom, and the Madison Forum. She coordinates with education activists, Christian leaders, Tea Party members from across the nation seeking the truth about education in general and Common Core standards in particular. So thank you very much.
I don't have a prepared presentation, so I'm kind of ping off the walls, bouncing from one subject to another. You probably can't see my table up here. The depth and scope of how evil Common Core Standards is. It's like a giant octopus spread over our nation with its tentacles going into every little piece of the pot that it can get into. And on my table, I mean, it just got so much I had to get organized. And so I created all of these folders. And I have 15 folders with different subjects on what is important for people to understand about our education system, legislation, Common Core, data collecting, corporate control, who's buying off our governors and our legislators, the Common Core standards for math and English and language arts, global governance, the National Governors Association, who they really are, the Achieve Inc., who's paying for Common Core, who's pushing it, school surveys, parental rights, homeschool and private school at risk. It's just unbelievable what's going on in education and what's been going on, as Mike said, in our nation for the last 50 years, he mentioned. But I've been studying Common Core and global governance and Agenda 21 and all of this for about 3 years now. And once you learn something, you can't go back, right? You have to keep learning more and more. And so I've been studying this challenge with education for almost 3 years now. I turned off my television a year ago, and it's been anywhere from 3 to 8 or 10 hours a day in research alone. Because every day my inbox fills with mail of news stories and what's happening, and that just leads me down that road. I want to tell you a little bit. Is there anybody in the room here that has no idea how we got Common Core Standards or what it is? Raise your hand for me if you have no idea. Okay. Since there are a few of you, I must start there real quick. Common Core Standards is a set of national standards for education that was created for all 50 states to implement and have the same set of standards in every state, where every child in every classroom on every day in every grade is studying the exact same thing, so that if that child should move from Georgia on Friday and start school in California on Monday, they would be right in step where they need to be, because everybody's doing the same thing. That's how they sold it to us. Okay? Now, the governor tells us that Common Core Standards are state-led, which is a fallacy. Or his definition of state-led is very different from mine. Common Core Standards came about with a 2009 Race to the Top federal competitive grant application. It came from $4.35 billion out of our 2009 stimulus money from that President Obama got this beautiful gift of money, and he gave $4.35 billion to Arnie Duncan in the Department of Education, told Arnie to have fun with it. He created this competition. All 50 states got the application. Georgia received it in November 2009. The application was due in January 2010. It was several hundred pages long. They got that thing filled out. But in order to receive any federal money, you had to agree to several things, and you got points for everything that you agreed to. One of the highest scoring points was to give up your state's education standards and agree to adopt Common Core standards 100% sight unseen. And for some reason, 45 state governors agreed to do that, plus the District of Columbia, sight unseen. And they made this decision in 2 months. Now, Governor Deal will tell you that these are state-led because the National Governors Association helped develop these standards. Well, the National Governors Association, what most people don't realize, and I certainly didn't know this, is not a legislative body. They are a trade organization. What do trade organizations do? They promote and plan how to promote products or services. Well, apparently the service that the National Governors Organization wanted to promote was nationalization. I started researching National Governors Association. They're a very nefarious group, actually. And we taxpayers pay for this. But 1987, when Bill Clinton was residing over the National Governors Association, they have transcripts online for every meeting dating back to 1910. It's fascinating. You should go and read them. But in 1987, the transcripts, Lee Iacocca was at this meeting, and there was a governor. His name is Governor Sinner. I don't remember what state he was from, because his name just fascinated me. But he asked Lee Iacocca, he said, wouldn't it be easier for corporations such as yours to make better profits if we didn't have all this nonsense with 50 states, with 50 different sets of regulations and rules for everything from highway use to business regulations to EPA and all of these 50 different standards. So wouldn't it be better if we nationalized everything, had one standard that every state had to comply with so that your corporation could make higher profits? And Lee Iacocca said, well, yeah, that'd be great. What amazed me is as I read through the transcript, there wasn't a single governor that stood up and said, well, wait a minute, we've got a system of federalism, that state sovereignty, that breaks everything this constitutional republic was founded on. Not a single governor, so evidently for at least 25 years they've been planning to nationalize everything, and that includes our education system. And that was very disappointing to hear that about our governors. Excuse me. So that's the National Governors Association. Now, they did not actually develop the standards, but they have been talking about them for 25 years at least. They actually hired a left-wing trade organization called Achieve Inc. to put the standards together. Now, the standards can be traced back to a 1992 letter written by Mark Tucker, who was with an education association. He wrote a letter to Hillary Clinton, and in this multiple-page letter, he outlines everything that Common Core is. Nationalized standards, curriculum aligned to the standards, students taking assessments to make sure that they are being indoctrinated into everything that the government wants them to believe, and the data collecting that would be stored on computers. So that was in 1992. So we can trace the standards back to that Mark Tucker letter. Hardly state-led. Now, state-led to me would mean, let me grab my little chart over here. I know you can't see this, but you can probably see all the little boxes on here, which are the corporations and individuals who worked on the standards. And I'll leave this up here for you to look at after the meeting, but there is not a single parent, teacher, or legislator on this chart. I'd hardly call that state-led. Okay, so that's how we got the standards. We were awarded the Race to the Top money based on agreeing to adopt the standards for Georgia. And Governor Deal, the day he was elected, he should have walked into his office and said, no, we're not having that in Georgia. This is unconstitutional for the federal government to be involved. Now, that's the other thing that Governor Deal will tell us, is that we are conspiracy theorists for thinking that the federal government is involved. And he used those words in a March 12th meeting with 30 conservative leaders in the room laying out why these Common Core is bad for Georgia. He said it's a conspiracy theory that the federal government was involved. But Race to the Top money tied to the standards, it seems like federal involvement to me. So, you know, I just want to start from there, and we could talk about how these standards have lower standards for math that's going to leave our children 2 years behind where they need to be to enter a four-year college. We could talk about how the fuzzy new math is complicated. We've got second graders crying in the classroom. There should be no crying in the second grade. We could talk about the informational text, replacing the classics of the literature, the informational texts that contain pornography and anti-American things. We could talk about other aspects of curriculum, though, with our education system that is not necessarily tied to Common Core standards, but this is all one big package. The revisionist history, that we're finding in our textbooks, where it's not so much changing the facts of history, but leaving out a lot of important facts that lead you to a conclusion about history that is not correct. The social studies textbooks that are teaching religion, focusing primarily on the pro-Islam, and there is a brochure that we passed out that explains that a little bit for you. We could talk about how our history textbooks teach our children that we are a national government and we are a democracy. I urge you to go to your school district and go to the curriculum director and ask to see the history textbook that your children are being taught from, in the social studies and the civics and the geography. Because what you will find is what I found in Fayette County, which is claims to be one of the best school districts in the state. And if we're one of the best school districts, then I just cringe to think how it could get worse. Because in Fayette County, we're not teaching our children how to read. We're using whole language as our primary reading instruction rather than phonics. And phonics is what we've taught individuals how to read for hundreds and hundreds of years, and it's proven to work every time. And I realized we were teaching our children phonics, whole language, rather than really focusing on phonics, when my sister's sixth grade classroom had so many students that were not reading at the sixth grade level. They were around the second grade level. Standards for Common Core do not include teaching cursive writing. Did y'all know that? You've dropped it in your school district.
All counties dropped it already. It had nothing to do with Common Core.
Well, they're not in the standards, but they dropped it before the standards came out?
Yes. My son cannot read cursive writing, which irritates the living heck out of me, but it had nothing to do with Common Core.
Well, have we gone to the school board and demanded to have cursive instruction put back in the curriculum?
No, I have not.
Does anybody see the danger of not teaching our children how to read cursive or write cursive? Mike?
I'd just like to add something to the conversation. I don't doubt that they dropped it before Common Core, but what we've got to keep in mind is Common Core has been under the table for a long time.
Common Core is just a renaming.
100% correct statement.
Well, all I said was they dropped it before Common Core.
Yeah, that is, I agree with that. But I'm just saying that you can't really say it's not a part of Common Core, because Common Core has been out there for over 25 years. They tried to implement it back in '95.
But Hall County did it on their own. They did it in statewide, but they've done it.
But you've got to remember, our educators go to conferences. This kind of stuff is talked about at conferences. They bring back information from conferences that they want to implement.
The teachers don't agree with it. It was the decision was made at the board level.
I'll rest my case.
Because every teacher I'm actually in school to become an educator, and the teachers don't agree with it.
Well, this is why it's real important for us to understand not only what our children are being taught, but what they're not being taught. The Common Core is a renaming of educational policies that have been trickling down from the Department of Education since 1965. 1965 was the year that the first Elementary and Secondary Education Act was passed, and for the first time, our federal government started pilfering our income tax money and putting it in a big old pot and using it to influence school districts they started in the inner cities of the largest cities in our nation. And does anybody know what the first carrot on the string was with that 1965 ESEA? Went to the inner cities where the minorities were, in Los Angeles, New York, Chicago, Miami, Detroit, and told the inner city school systems that if they would drop the teaching of phonics and change over entirely to whole language reading, they would give them some money, and they all agreed to. Immediately, the literacy rates just plummeted, and the high school dropout rates soared. When you don't teach a child how to read, they can't learn. And so that was what our federal government started doing 50 years ago with the SEA. Yes?
I'm probably a little ignorant here, but I don't understand what whole language reading is.
Well, let's describe what phonics is. Most of us who are 50 or older, although not always, because I've talked to folks my age who were not taught phonics. Phonics is deciphering the code. It's putting letters together and sounding out the word. The PH makes the sound in the SR. And it's putting those letters together to be able to sound out that word. You can teach a 3-year-old phonics, and they can read fluently a year later. They may not understand every word they're reading, because that comes later, but they're sounding out the words. Whole language is memorizing the picture of the word. Do you remember the book, See, Dick, Run? Oh, I'm sorry.
That is an acronym.
Okay, go ahead.
Whole language is learning language in it is actually, it doesn't have to be exclusive of phonics. But whole language is learning language in an authentic primary method. Seeing things, having authentic literature, like things that are from recipes, from menus around the classroom, having literacy around the classroom, and having children be engaged and want to learn the language. And then when they become curious, then you do skills instruction within that to support that and to include phonics. So it can be a blended approach, because in the education that I'm in, we still learn phonics as instructors, and we still have to know phonics as instructors. And basically you have skill-based instruction and you have whole language instruction. And phonics is skill-based, but you use skill-based within whole language. It's not exclusive of each other.
Well, you're right, but phonics is deciphering the code.
That is
and every education expert will tell you you must teach a child how to decipher the code first. Now there are sight words. We all memorize the sight words, and, it's, of. But that's very different. See Dick run, see Jane run. That was part of whole language, where a child memorized the picture of the word to where when they went home with their little reader and read it to their mom, and mom thought they were learning how to read. So that's all part of the education system that we have going on today. I was on the radio show this morning, and I was listening to the radio show before I came on. They were talking a lot about Obamacare and what was going on in Congress, and a lot of callers were calling in to complain about how unconstitutional all of our representatives and senators are, and how they talk so much about democracy, and I'm like, well, where do you think they learned that? They learned that in the K-12 government-run education system. Now, whether they believe that or not, they are teaching our children that we should be global citizens. We should be global workers for the global workforce, for the global economy, and American exceptionalism is gone. National sovereignty is gone, because we're teaching our children that America is not any better than any other nation in the world. And I don't know about you, but that really bothers me a lot. Thank you. And so now we've been teaching this for 2, 3, 4 decades, maybe forever. I'm trying to remember back to when I was in high school. I actually don't remember learning a lot in high school. I remember going from class to class to class, and I was so bored I couldn't stand it. I couldn't wait to get out. So I got out a year before everybody else, because I just got my minimums done, and I got out and moved on with my life. Thomas Sowell was in a radio interview with Phyllis Schlafly the other day, and he said to me, this is so interesting, the most elite, intelligent person in the world only knows 10% of everything there is to know. 10% of everything there is to know. And I thought, oh my gosh, I must be in the negative numbers. Because I will be honest with you, 5 years ago, I was very embarrassed to tell people I didn't have a clue what the Constitution said. I wasn't taught the Constitution in school. I was never exposed to the Constitution. So why would I know that the federal government was not the boss of me? Right? It wasn't until Obama came into office and it was executive orders and it was czars and all this, I started, what is this all about? And I started doing some studying, and that's when I did my own self-study on the Constitution and realized why we are where we are today. But this is what we're teaching our children in public schools, see? We're not teaching them the Constitution. Why aren't we as taxpayers standing up and demanding that we have like a whole textbook on the Constitution? The history textbook in Fayette County has 10 pages on the Constitution, and the sidebar studies on the Constitution are not correct. I had constitutional scholars review it because I'm not a scholar. I just know that much. I know what Article 1, Section 8 is all about, okay? I know what the 10th Amendment, I know what the Bill of Rights is, but you ask any high school graduate in this state, they have no idea what Article 1, Section 8 or the 10th Amendment or the Bill of Rights is all about. Have no clue. I do know this, that the United Nations is working very hard to replace our Bill of Rights with the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights. That's the danger that's in. That's the danger of globalism, global citizenship, and all of that other stuff. Okay. So I want to give you some topics, and then I want you to tell me what you want to hear about, okay? Because this is really a 2-day seminar, 8 hours each day. And in the next 30 minutes, we don't really have time to cover everything that I want to cover. But quickly, I want to show you these 2 brochures that are on your table. This organization, Operation Jericho Project. This is an association I got involved with about 3 months ago. And this is a national coalition of pastors and Christian leaders who are very concerned about what's going on in our nation and in our education system specifically. And this coalition of pastors realizes that the church has fallen down on their job. The church has been afraid to speak out on the truth because of that 501c3 status. That's false information, okay? We need to get our pastors speaking the truth. When I look around this room, I don't see parents in this room. I see probably grandparents. The parents are not coming to our meetings. We need the parents to hear what their children are being exposed to. And so we figured the best place is in the church. That's where you find parents on Sunday. And we need our pastors speaking out the truth. And so this website, Operation Jericho Project, we're putting together these kind of brochures that can be printed out and given to our pastors. This brochure on the anti-Christian pro-Islam instruction, that gives you some clear information about what our pastors need to know that our children are being exposed to. And then we have our national sexuality education standards. Our children are being taught sex ed in school right now at inappropriate ages. We used to think it was just like when they're 11 or 12 years old. It starts in kindergarten now. And that leads me into something very critical I need to tell you about. When you look on the back of this brochure, the National Sex Ed Standards, you'll see information about Senate Bill in Congress 1094. This is the reauthorization of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. Remember we talked about 1965? It's supposed to be reauthorized every 5 years. This is the funding mechanism that our federal government devised to be able to control the curriculum in our schools. It's unconstitutional, as you know, for the federal government to be involved in education. So what they did is they just developed this big pot of money and made it voluntary for states to take the money and then implement all the policies the federal government told them to implement. Seems a little skewed, doesn't it? Doesn't it make you wonder why all of these many decades our governors allowed this to happen? Because that's what it was. Our legislators and our governors allowed this federal takeover of our schools. So the ESEA is being going through Congress right now for reauthorization. In the House, they've already passed their version, that's H.R. 5. Before I tell you about these two bills, I'm going to tell you the end game goal of Common Core. And I do have documentation on this, and you can ask me if you want more details. The end game goal is to dismantle all of our locally elected school boards. Have all appointed councils in regions running education with a national school board in control. That's the end game goal. And they will do this through the creation of charter schools. Now I want you to write this down. Charter School Trap by Charlotte Iserby. I want you to look that up. In fact, if you go to Operation Project Jericho, there is a video library link. You can find a video where Charlotte Iserby talks about the charter school trap. Charter schools were created by the federal government. They gave us permission to establish charter schools with unelected councils that are not accountable to the taxpayers who are funding the schools. Charter schools are public schools without representation. And that's the federal government's goal. So H.R. 5 in the federal government, the reauthorization of the ESEA, has a lot of money in a big old pot they're going to send to the states to set up more charter schools. Break down our traditional schools that are run by the school boards and set up charter schools that are run by an unelected council. And in Georgia, we already have that established because 2 years ago, they fooled the voters into thinking we were going to create a school choice and alternate school system of charter schools, and we needed an unelected council to take control of our schools, and that was the Charter Commission. So we have that unelected council already in place in Georgia. That legislation, by the way, came down from the American Legislative Exchange Council. And I know that because I saw that legislation in other states across the nation. That bill did not come from we the people. So the reauthorization of the ESEA, like I said, in the House they've already passed their version. In the Senate, it's a much more nefarious piece of legislation. This is an 1,194-page bill, and it should be called the Obama Core Bill. In this bill, is legislation that is going to have federal, this is the summary of it. This is the summary of the ESEA, of the 1,194 pages. Downloaded this from the Department of Education. There is not a funding mechanism left out. I mean, they're funding everything from college and career readiness to supporting school choice, to rewarding local innovations and fostering race to the top, rigorous and fair accountability, collecting, data collecting. Hispanics and Afro-Americans and Asians are all different little groups. They're going to send money if you've got these different groups. Teacher and leader pathways, they've got so much money. You know, we've got a lot of money in the federal government. You know that, right? So they've got so much money wrapped up in this coercion mechanism to cause our states to want to accept it because we are going to be cash strapped. We're going to have a hard time funding our schools, and the federal government knows it. So they can print some money, send some money to us, and coerce us to do their bidding through the ESEA. In this is federal mandates for teacher evaluation. See, our federal government is going to determine what makes a good teacher. It won't be our parents or our local school boards anymore. Teacher evaluations based on the assessments of our children. You know, the assessments are computer assessments. You know the difference between an assessment and a test? An assessment determines value. A test tests skills learned. Our children are no longer children, they're human capital. That's in this bill. And that's promoted by our Georgia School Board Association as well. So they're going to assess our children. The federal government will determine what assessments to give our children and whether they score high enough and are worthy to move on into this in the system. And they're also going to mandate Common Core standards. Mandate them, no more choice. And so Senator Lamar Alexander played his little game in the Senate hearings on this bill, and he says to Senator Harkin, now if the states have to do federal guidelines for teacher evaluations based on federal guidelines on student assessments, and they must implement Common Core, oh, and they're adding another 100 points to the data collecting, to bring it up to 500 data points that they're collecting on our children and personal, private information on our families. So Senator Alexander says to Harkin, doesn't that really create one national school board? Because the school boards at the local level, well, they'll be neutered. And Senator Harkin said, well, yeah, but they don't have to accept the money. Do you get where I'm going with this now? What we can do at the Georgia General Assembly is going to be very important, because I'm telling you, this bill will pass. Make no doubts about it. This bill will pass. And what we have to make sure is that when the money flow trickles into our state, we make sure our legislature and our state school board says, no, thank you. We don't want your money. We want to end the control to the slave master of the education of our children. Does anybody in this room know what percentage of our $18 to $19 billion a year budget for Georgia education, what percentage of that is federal dollars?
About 50.
Less than 7%.
Oh, federal dollars.
Federal dollars.
Okay.
18 to $19 billion a year we spend on Georgia education from the state. That's not counting local. 7% of that is federal dollars. But they have 99% control of our schools. Fayett's school superintendent says, yeah, they do. I have to do what the state and the federal government tells me to do. All I can do is implement it. Which is interesting, because we discovered that in 2010, the state school board changed the rules. They now have control of determining the curriculum in our classroom in 2010. It's not the local school boards, as our governor and our legislators who promote Common Core will tell us. These are just standards. The local school district still selects curriculum. Well, in 2010, the state school board gave themselves that responsibility. That's the new rule. And we're now pushing, our state board of education is now pushing our local school districts to only do their constitutional duties as a school board, and that's to make a strategic plan and hire the superintendent. Apparently, somewhere along the line, someone changed the responsibilities of our local school boards.
How did we lose the right to vote for superintendents?
Well, and that's another interesting thing. We need to reestablish that local superintendent election. We sure do. Now, our Georgia School Board Association is promoting stopping the election of our state superintendent. They want to have that appointed as well. See, they want everything to be an appointed council, no more elected representation. And they're working very hard at that through legislation and other means. Now, also on your table, we had Georgia legislation that has passed to support Common Core. End-game goal of Common Core is to get rid of all the classroom teachers. Wow. Get rid of the teacher. We will have a facilitator in every classroom. Obama has a program he started called Teach for America. Teach for America is a 5 to 6 week course to train people how to go in the classroom to be facilitators in that classroom. The major challenge with Common Core was all of the computers that the assessments were going to require. They want our kids on computers for all their learning, not just their assessments. Because computer online learning can be controlled at a centralized location. And it can be changed at the flip of a switch. So this is the end-game goal. Get rid of our school boards, get rid of our teachers, have facilitators in the classroom, our kids sitting in front of computer monitors to learn everything, okay? So in Georgia in 2012, in the 2012 session, HB 713, the School to Work Act was passed overwhelmingly. You see the votes there, and signed by our governor. This requires a career path be selected at the kindergarten level. Can you believe Republicans would vote for this? Yes.
This is the very thing that was done in East Germany and the Soviet Union. This is the exact same model.
That's right.
Precisely.
Did you know that in the early 1900s, our current government-run education system was based on the Prussian model of education to train the military? So we're using that model. So anyway, when I first saw that bill, I thought, well, that's ridiculous. This will fall apart. The first time a mom gets a note home saying, you need to select little Johnny's career path in kindergarten, they'll be raising up. But then I reread the bill. There is no parental involvement in this. It doesn't say the parents or the child will select a career path. It says a career path will be selected. Who's going to select that career path? Our state government, our government, based on their assessments on the computers, on what they've been learning. Yes?
This essentially has already been going on, not in that specific career paths have been chosen, but I know that I myself, I'm younger than most of the people in the room, and I identify with a lot of the things that you're saying because they were done to me when I was in school, to some degree. I remember that I was on the college preparatory seal, and there were certain classes that were available to me that were not available to other people, and other people were on tech prep seals who certain classes were available to them, and they already have a lot of divisions like this in place, and so this is really not a far cry from what we're already doing.
Well, you're right. When I was in school, we had the tech path and the college path. But I chose which path I wanted to be on.
I did not.
Oh, you did not?
No. I was told that I was going to college, and I did what I was told.
Wow. Yeah, this has been going on for quite a while.
When we started, we had a class. It was like a study hall class that everyone had to take, and they gave us a sheet of paper and said, this is the path that you're going to take. That was in Habersham County.
What year was that?
That was in 1999.
Mm-hmm.
My wife went to school in Michigan. She said that she had the exact same thing. She said she didn't want to go to college, but she went because they told her that she had to. You know, it sounds absurd, but it's...
Actually, all of these programs started being implemented during the Clinton administration with the Goals 2000, and the School to Work legislation was passed in 1992, and the reauthorization of the SEA all set in place mechanisms to do what we are seeing today in a big way, and Common Core is just going to be the nail in the coffin to ever going back to a good classical education. The second bill is SB 289. See that? And it says, mandates online learning. Mandates. Now this is the state telling our local school districts, you must allow any student to take online courses, even if that same course is in your brick and mortar. And you must pay $250 for each course for each child. This is mandated from the state. And if a student wants to do their entire curriculum online, then they shall be permitted to do so. Shall means you will do it in legislation. And there's a lot of concerns. Of course, parents should be concerned that without printed textbooks, printed homework, printed tests, and no teacher to monitor the content, there should be concerns by parents that they will never know what their students are learning online. So that needs to be repealed. And that passed, as you see, overwhelmingly. And then we have in the 2012 session HB 797. That was the enabling legislation to the Charter Commission that no promoter of the Charter Commission ever talked about 797. But this is the legislation that gives the Charter Commission complete control over our local school districts. No longer, I mean, it is not just an appeals board, as they told us. If a charter petitioner goes to our local school district and says, I want to set up a school in your district. I want to set up a school that's going to teach Islam fundamentalism. I want to set up a school that's going to teach anti-Americanism. I want to set up a school that's going to teach, it's going to be run by a Chinese company. And our school board says, no. Or they say, I want to set up a school that's going to teach globalism and world global dominance. That's the IB, International Baccalaureate. And our school board says, no, get out of here. And then they should be able to go to the Charter Commission, see, and they review it. And if the Charter Commission says, yeah, you're going to have that school in your district. You have no say-so in it because we have complete control. And we will be the governing arm of that school. They report to us, not your local school board. So that's HB 797. So review that. And that needs to be amended greatly and make that Charter Commission an appeals board only, as they told us that it would be. I did notice that there are some local school districts that are applying for Race to the Top funding. Mike sent this out, and they need to know that the local school districts are applying for bondage, should they agree to that. All right, so what I want to do is just give you some topics as we wrap up and let you ask me some questions. He's asking the question, how does this affect homeschooling? Is that?
Yeah, how they are basically going to eliminate homeschooling through regulation, that they're going to require that all students who attend college or enroll in college will have to have been taught Common Core standards.
Well, the Common Core, first of all, homeschool parents right now are going to face a challenge that the GED testing is being changed to align with the Common Core. So any parent that wants their child to do well on the high school graduation test, the GED, is going to have to teach their child to the test of Common Core. It means they're going to have to learn all of this social justice agenda and indoctrination into anti-American, anti-Christian values that we've been talking about here today. Yes?
I am Edwin Gravitt. I am the team leader for the new group that we formed called Youth Outreach. I am the team leader, the Bill of Rights team leader. I have a question. Anybody can answer it that wants to. I hope you give me some stupid answer. Why was the American Civil War fought?
States' rights. States' rights. States' rights.
Found one that knows the right answer. It was fought by the North to destroy states' rights. Article 4, Section 4 of the United States Constitution says that the United States shall guarantee to every state in this union a Republican form of government, meaning that the majority can't tell the minority how to live their lives, etc., or their representatives can't. Good old boys Thomas Jefferson and James Madison thought that they should guarantee that some more with the 10th Amendment and throw in the 9th Amendment as well, because that's all of us. I never heard of this being taught in a public school. I was taught it by Southerners. I am a Southerner. I had Southern ancestors that fought in that Civil War. They fought right here when Sherman came storming through. It was fought to destroy states' rights. This is what brought the problem. What we're talking about tonight is a result of that war. I guarantee you, whether anybody wants to admit that or not. And it's going to take, I'm afraid that a third American Revolution is going to become, I think it's already necessary. It's just when people decide they've had more than enough of it. And so I just want to say that because most people I know do not realize that that war was not fought to free slaves or to preserve the Union. It was fought to destroy states' rights, draw all power to Washington, D.C., which is exactly what we have. That's what we're dealing with this right here.
Yeah, I agree with you on all of that. And to the teachers in the room, I just want to read something to you that was written by Donna Gardner. For some reason I misplaced it here. Donna Gardner is a 33-year educator in English language arts in Texas, and she helped write the Texas standards for English language arts. And she understands the place of the teachers with Common Core. Teachers are as much a victim with Common Core in our whole education system, outcome-based education, values clarification, no child left behind. The teachers have lost their ability to teach our children in the way that they know is the proper way to teach a child. Because just as we saw with this book, the teacher's manual with Common Core, with the English language arts and with the math standards, is a manual that's word for word what you will teach that day. So it's not the teacher teaching using her God-given abilities and her training. It's what the Common Core standards say that she's going to teach to that class that day. And she must teach to the class what the manual tells her to teach, because her students are going to be assessed on what they learn. And her teacher evaluations will be based on how well the students do on those assessments. This is the danger of what we found ourselves in now. And when it comes to what's being taught, the philosophy, I think we have to understand, why are we teaching our children this way? There's two education philosophies. Donna Gardner, that I was just telling you about, defines his education philosophies, and this is at Operation Jericho Project website. Two education philosophies, where if you're over the age of 50, you know what the first education philosophy is all about. It could be referred to as the traditional method, the method of teaching that people, perhaps 50 years or older, experienced when we were in school. It is knowledge-based, academic, clearly worded, grade-level specific content that is tested largely through objectively scored tests. The standards are built from K through 12 and are taught mostly through direct, systematic instruction. That included, of course, the teaching of phonics, grammar, correct usage, spelling, cursive, classical literature, expository writing, research writing, the 4 math functions, and on the history and social studies. What our children are exposed to today, and what our teachers are being forced to teach, is a type 2. And the end goal of type 2 is the indoctrination and manipulation of students' minds. Outcome-based education and values clarification, write those words down, look those up, there's lots of information on it. Eagle Forum does a lot of research and reports on this. This type of teaching is not teacher-directed teaching. It's not the teacher sharing her skills and guiding students in learning. This teaching is project-based, discovery learning, subjective. It's more important to emphasize cognitive domain, in other words, beliefs, opinions, emotions of the children. Subjectively assessed based upon the value system of the evaluator. That's what those assessments are all about. Not going to be scored by our local teachers and school systems. They'll be scored in the DC by a bureaucratic system. It emphasizes multiculturalism, political correctness, environmental extremism, diversity, social justice agenda. The standards are built backwards from grade 12. So outcome-based education this is what we want that child to know in the end game. And now we must remediate them until they change their value system and believe what we want them to believe. And that's why we have Obama and President today. That's been going on since the early 90s, maybe even before then. So what's going on with homeschooling? Well, not only the GED is being realigned to the Common Core standards, but the ACT and the SAT college entrance exams are being realigned to the Common Core standards. David Coleman is president of the College Board. David Coleman is the leftist under Obama that helped write the English language arts standards, even though he's not an English language arts educator. So he's aligning the college entrance exams. Okay? Then we also have to worry about some legislation that's going through Congress. Obamacare, shocker for you. Send in the social workers. In the page 838 of Obamacare, section 1904, is the home visitation programs for families with young children and families expecting children. Yes?
I didn't mean to interrupt your train of thought right there, but you've thrown out a couple of words that are kind of key words
Okay.
many times. Globalism is one of them. And it seems like to me that because this seems to be going back into time through various time frames of this administration, that administration, no particular administration is in charge of this. It's like there's an invisible hand that is creating the conditions that's allowing this thing to propagate through our country. So I'm wondering if you have an idea of what this invisible hand might be that is at the core of Common Core and practically all of these other things that are happening in our country.
Do you have the answer?
Yeah, I have the answer. How about the devil?
I couldn't say it better. This is an attack, a spirituality attack on our nation and our children.
Well, an earthly answer, though.
Okay.
Maybe an earthly answer is what I'm looking for, and I agree with you.
Could I suggest that you read the recent interview with Justice Scalia and one of the liberal reporters, because he mentioned that there might be, quote, the devil at work in this country? You need to read that. It's very enlightening.
Okay.
Well, and you want to know individuals, real people.
Real organization.
It's been an infiltration into our federal government, as you know. The same people that are controlling what's going on in DC today have been controlling our education system because their goal was to control our children and to change our citizenry. I can recommend a book for you. This is a free book. This is Charlotte Thompson Iserby. She will tell you who's in charge of this, how they implemented their programs, the deliberate dumbing down of America. Charlotte Thompson Iserby. Just search that and you will find this PDF. Charlotte Thompson Iserby was the senior policy advisor under Ronald Reagan in the Department of Education. He was going to shut down the Department of Ed. If you remember his campaign speeches, he said, Charlotte, come sit in the seat until I can shut down this department. Well, for some reason...
And he got shot.
Bingo. I don't know how that's connected, but he changed a lot of his positions after that incident. Yes?
If you need to put a face with this, let's start with Bill Gates. Because he stands to make more money from Common Core than Microsoft.
Here's who's controlling education right now. All right? Bill Gates, Microsoft Corporation, signed an agreement with UNESCO in 2005 to promote and push the Common Core standards. UNESCO was formed in 1947 by the United Nations. It stands for United Nations Education Scientific Organization. It is meant to be the world's school board. Okay, UNESCO. Ronald Reagan untied our connections with UNESCO when he was president. In 2005, George W. Bush put us back in with UNESCO. Our curriculum, Common Core, is falling under the United Nations agenda. Hate to break it to you. That's who that is. They're connected to the Department of Education. But we also have a Muslim Brotherhood is involved. So there's a lot of nefarious characters, like you say, the devil. Yes, Mary.
Is there any link other than the United Nations to Agenda 21?
It's all tied together.
Yeah.
If you read the chapter on Agenda 21 about education, it talks about Common Core.
What were you reading in Obamacare there, that section
Okay.
where you were interrupted, ma'am?
I'm sorry. Says on page 838 in section 1904, and this section is called the Home Visitation Programs for Families with Young Children and Families Expecting Children. See, they will take away our ability to homeschool our children. They'll find a reason that must be done. There is provisions in this bill that say we will assign a social worker to any family at risk, where a child could be at risk. I can't remember all 5 of the categories, but one of the categories was if either parent's under the age of 21. I had my first child at age 20. If anyone is a smoker in the home, that's at risk, they need a social worker assigned to that child. If there is an ex-military, because they could possibly have PTSD. This is in Obamacare, okay? And so they will determine, they'll send a social worker in and they'll determine with that homeschool family, yeah, you can't be teaching your children. In Alabama, they already had legislation that they tried to pass through that was going to require that homeschooled children had to be taught by a certified teacher. They stopped it in Alabama. Yes, Mary?
Our caseworkers are already so overwhelmed that they're unable to properly, in my opinion, do their job. how in the world can they take on this additional responsibility? We're going to have to hire more social workers.
We'll hire 16,000 IRS agents.
We're going to get more people that we're going to have to.
The whole idea, you understand that we have $1 trillion in debt in college student loans right now. These individuals are not finding jobs, but they owe the federal government money. What will the federal government do?
Oh, come be a social worker, we'll forgive your debt.
Enslave them.
Yeah,
right.
enslave them.
That's right, it's my,
I'd just like to share a couple of things. First off, you briefly hit that these standards are copyrighted. And I guess it's been about 2 months ago, I called down to Governor Deal's office, and my question was, can someone please tell me why Governor Deal wants to give away our educational sovereignty to private organizations that have copyrighted the Common Core standards? Well, the lady told me, she said she didn't know, but she'd have somebody get back with her. Well, it wasn't long, I think it was the next day, I got a phone call. I happened to be sitting online looking at the Common Core standards when the phone call came in. And this came from the people with Governor Deal that are his Common Core experts. And so I asked the question again. She said, oh, the Common Core standards are not copyrighted. We can change anything we want to. I said, wait, hold on just a minute. I said, I'm on this site. I gave her the URL. I said, here's what it says. And it plainly states that the Chief Counsel of State, Superintendent,
school officers,
whatever it is, own the copyrights along with the NGA. It's plain, black and white. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. Now, my point is, that tells you a little bit about how much Governor Deal knows about the Common Core standards to begin with. If he doesn't know something as basic as the fact that they're copyrighted and cannot be changed, then we don't have good leadership. It's that simple. And the second thing I wanted to talk about, there is an article online, and I think I sent this out to some of you guys, I'm not certain. But it talks about a lady named Mercedes Snyder, and she took it upon herself to start investigating where the money came from to do all this stuff, and how it is all this stuff just mushroomed here right in just the last few years. Well, she ended up putting 5 different posts online.
I have them printed out here, 40 pages.
And every one of these posts online go back to one person, Bill Gates.
Yeah.
This is not a state-led curriculum. This is a Bill Gates-led curriculum. And what you don't know about Bill Gates is he's been very, very busy buying up publishing companies that publish what?
Textbooks.
Textbooks. And what else has he been buying up?
Khan Academy.
Where's it?
He's
He's
been
locking
giving money to
down.
Khan Academy. And we're talking about Khan Academy as the next great thing of online learning. And
He's
it's in our
locking
schools
down all
already, but it's
digital
Bill Gates' money.
learning as well as all textbook learning. So this is not state-led. If it's anything, it's Bill Gates-led. And if anybody would like to see any of these things, I'll be glad to show them to you. But you can flip through here, and he spent over 160 some odd million dollars.
It's over 200 million now.
Is it 200 million?
It's over 200 million. That's just what we know about.
Guess how much the Georgia State Board got? $1.9 million to promote Common Core standards. Folks, we're being sold out. We're being bought. It's not a voluntary issue at all. It's strictly money.
Yeah. The Chamber of Commerce and the PTAs, our school boards associations.
This week, on the 700 Club, it's like Tuesday and Wednesday, you go to the cbn.com website, you can see the segment, and it's all about the negatives of Common Core. They featured a school district on Long Island in New York. It's very well done, and it highlights everything you guys have been talking about.
Oh, one other thing. I don't know whether there are any principals in here from Hall County. Are there? We have any principals?
Retired assistant principal.
We have anybody from the Board of Education or with the Hall County administration? folks, every one of those people, every principal was invited to this meeting to tell us what was wrong with what she had to say, as well as all the school administrators at the Hall County Board of Education. I sent the emails out myself personally.
Elementary as well?
Yes, every school principal in Hall County will receive this. If they're, well, I didn't get any kickback, so I got to assume it went to all of them.
There's someone asked the question, how is it that this thing gets perpetuated? If you remember, even here back in the early 90s, we had this whole thing about some whole language stuff, and one of the new waves of educational theory, they caused a superintendent to resign in about 93 or 4 or 5, somewhere around there. But one of the, I just finished a long career in the state government. One of the reasons that this stuff gets perpetuated, according to several close friends of mine that work in the Department of Education downtown, is that the superintendents and the Department of Education are a revolving door. Every time a superintendent loses his job, unless he's going to another school system, he's going to work downtown in the Twin Towers building in the State Department of Education, and then they go back out again.
They go through 350 hours of superintendent indoctrination before they're allowed to be certified to serve as a superintendent. The indoctrination is Sue Ella Dadweiler's words. Sue Ella Dadweiler writes for Georgia Insight. She's our 34-year Capitol correspondent, so she knows what she's talking about. But so they are completely enmeshed into the agenda, and they support it and push it onto the school boards. Also attend workshops where they're enmeshed into the agenda. And so there's a lot of behind the scenes going on, and we are at it in attack. Now I want to tell you, if you want to learn a little bit more, real easy and quick, if you want to share a video with your pastor, indoctrination. Have you seen it? This is what we want to wake up our pastors, so they will start preaching the truth from the pulpit. I have several here. They're only $15. There's a packet of information that you can put together with that.
We've been passing those DVDs out, and we actually just mailed several dozen of them to local pastors.
What group did that?
Me.
Awesome. We need more of that. Talk to you.
Let's pass a basket for him, a donation basket.
We need to do that. These are the supporting information that can go along with the DVD. That's at Operation Jericho website. And I just thank you all so much. I know a lot of what I had to say today is not good to hear. I don't like learning it. I don't like talking about it. God said you're going to do it, though, and so woe will be unto him who does not do what God says. So thank you all so very much.